I didn't ask beforehand. Do you have a trip planned over the holiday?
I did. I went to Oaxaca de Juarez.
I wasn't entirely certain if that was real time or if that was a follow-up when I saw the pictures.
No. I mean...
well, you know what I mean. Like, was it,
yeah,
current?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, I went to Oaxaca. It was pretty cool. It's named after, the de Juarez is named after Benito Juarez. And finally, instead of looking up the importance of Benito Juarez, I found out on that trip.
That's always fun.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and share with you and the brief information that I got. And that is that he was the first and only president of Mexico that has is indigenous. He was a Sabotec, and so that was really important, as well as the fact that he fought off the French, and he is known for saving Mexico from a French invasion, as well as continuing relations with his diplomacy.
Neat.
Yeah. Now, the details of which I have not, I briefly read about, but I don't know them well enough that I feel comfortable reiterating them.
I knew, I didn't know any of the story. I just had heard the name before. So that's always interesting to learn a little bit of info.
Yeah, same for me. Like, I knew Benito Juarez was important to Mexico, but I did not know why.
We don't have any follow-up unless you've added something in the past few moments or so.
I feel like one time you said, our show doesn't require, there's like, you could think of only like one show that has follow-up, and I was like, yeah, he's right. There's only like one show that I know of that has follow-up, and I was like, yeah, there's lots of follow-up. But I just don't feel like it's important to record it at this moment. Like, I didn't feel like I was like listening to our podcast, and I didn't feel like it was like, I was like, oh, I should follow up on that, but you know what? I don't have to. And if somebody ever calls it out, I'll be more than happy to follow up with.
And that should be kind of the standing thing. We can interject a statement every time. Well, this could be follow-up, but we'll wait for somebody to ask about it.
Totally. I like that. I still want to try the inline follow-up on something that I really want to follow up on.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Just because I like the idea, so that's all.
Well, absent anything else, I haven't followed much surrounding news of the Olympics in general. So
there are going to be no spectators.
I did notice that, yesterday or the day before, as of the time we record, they were talking about another lockdown.
Oh, did the Olympics start yet?
No. I saw Japan issued another lockdown and stated that there would not be spectators ahead of Delta variant outbreaks of COVID. Yeah,
this has been a fear of mine from as soon as we saw the light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine. This has been a fear of mine. So far, as I understand it, the vaccine is still effective against the variant, the Delta variant. But I'm afraid that at some point we're going to screw around long enough that we'll find a variant that we're just not quite we'll need an additional vaccine for.
Yeah, I've been trying to kind of follow the news. I stopped paying as much attention to it just because behaviorally, we hadn't really changed anything from what we were doing anyway. And so I was trying to kind of not follow it as closely for a couple of weeks just to kind of get that mental break. But there are a couple of things that have stuck out in my head lately. There have been a handful of cases reported of people infected with dual strains, like the alpha and beta variants at the same time, which is something that, of course, raises the concern that also, what does that mean for the efficacy of the vaccines if you have, 3 or all 4 variants? Plenty of questions that I am nowhere near suited enough to answer or talk about.
I'm gonna go ahead and recommend that anyone who is like wanting to dive deeper into this, read about it or whatever, like from the CDC and so forth. But also, if you're listening to this podcast, you might listen to other podcasts. There's a dauntingly long podcast called This Week in Virology. And I don't listen to it every week because it's a 2-hour podcast. And it's like 7 or 8 virologists on a panel, and they break it down pretty well and speak in layman's terms about what it is that going on. And it's all SARS-CoV-2 stuff, because that's what's going on in virology. That's the world of virology these days. And so they have helped me, like that podcast has helped me to understand things better, as well as like set my mind at ease a bit better as well.
And so the other thing that I've seen, I know Pfizer made a public announcement about recommending emergency authorization for a booster dose, so a third dose, sometime in the 6 to 12 months after the initial vaccination time frame. And that's been met with pretty strong lashback, actually. And it seems to be driven mostly as a result of not getting enough of the vaccine out in the first place to underprivileged or poor countries. It doesn't necessarily seem to be an argument that a booster is not warranted, but that the initial focus needs to be on getting the vaccine everywhere possible first. I haven't read that one in as much detail, but I understand the thought. The more you can get vaccinated, the better chance we have of slowing down variants in the first place. But it also feels like it's the kind of thing that could proceed simultaneously, because they were talking about asking for approval.
Absolutely.
Not, starting boosters. So, and maybe it's just because I haven't read all the details that I don't know where that line's drawn, but it sure seems like from a logical standpoint, you could do both.
It does. It also seems like maybe you could also start. I hesitate to use the word mandate, but start do more than just encouraging people to get the vaccine where it's available. I mean, it's shocking to me, like what's going on. I saw a TikTok video. It showed. It said, "This is Europe getting the vaccine, taking the vaccine," and it showed a woman. She was dressed real nice. She had heels on. There's a skateboard in front of her. There's a beer can on the skateboard. She stomps on the back end of the skateboard. Creates a catapulting motion, and the beer flies up towards her. She catches in her hand. She lifts up one leg. She pokes the beer with the heel of her shoe, and then shotguns the beer. And then it goes, here's Australia doing the same thing. Similar woman, dressed nice. She's clunky with the flipping, the catapulting of the beer can. She's fumbles catching the beer can. She struggles getting it poked with the heel of her shoe. And then she finally gets the beer and she's drinking it. And then she's like casually walking away, kind of gagging on it. And I'm just thinking, I was like, Alabama in the United States is kind of like they flick the beer can and smack themselves right in the forehead and knock themselves out.
Yeah, I think that's more than just Alabama, but it's a fairly apt description.
But at this point, Alabama's dead last. I mean, we're 51 because we're counting like either D.C. or Puerto Rico. I don't know. And we're not even 50.
I thought we trended higher than Missouri.
Well, that's new information for me.
I'm not up to date on the vaccination rates, but the last thing that I thought I remembered hearing was that Alabama has not, of course, crossed 50%, but was at least in the mid-40s, which was better than a couple of places. But that information could be wildly outdated too.
It could be.
It's one of the drawbacks to Bama Tracker not being up and continually running.
Point being, we should be well over 70% at this point. in the country, like nationwide, and then breaking it down state by state. I mean, yeah, it just
there is a morbid aspect to it of embracing the concept of survival of the fittest, and in this case, the fittest being those who are intelligent enough to do something.
So, like my background in studying this is like really, I always point out, it's like, so survival of the fittest means that all the kids dying would be survival of the fittest because they haven't. It's basically anyone who hasn't procreated. As soon as you can procreate, it doesn't matter what happens to you because your genes have been passed on. So, yes and no. Sorry, I'm just being nitpicky with the term survival of the fittest in the evolutionary biology sense. But there's that. But the problem is, it's like, if we fuck around long enough, we're going to end up with a variant that might put us back to square one.
Oh, yeah. I certainly am not advocating for it. I'm just pointing out that there is that mentality to it as well, that if you can hold out long enough and be intelligent about things, maybe the problem corrects itself by morbidity rates.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened 100 years ago. There's no vaccine for H1N1. They had to wait for it to evolve into a less virulent strain. I mean, it killed a lot of folks, and I got to thinking. I was like, I don't think I really knew that there was a pandemic 100 years ago. Not in the terms pandemic like we're experiencing. Like, I didn't know. Like, I didn't have first of all, I didn't have a really good sense of an idea of what a pandemic was and what that would look like. Like, I think about like the first SARS virus. Like, that was like, I remember how that affected the folks in Asia, and it stayed relatively controlled. So I don't know if that was considered a pandemic. It wasn't a global pandemic, but I didn't have a good sense of what a pandemic was. And I just remember that, and it wasn't until this pandemic that I actually realized what was going on 100 years ago in 1918. And it also made so much more sense for this movie that I watched where somebody died of influenza. I was like a young teenager, and I was like, Mom, what's influenza? She's like, it's the flu. And I was like, really? People die from the flu? And she's like, they did. And I was like, okay. I just didn't have a good sense of like what happened 100 years ago. And it kind of made me think, because like 100 years from now, will people just be getting like their COVID vaccine and be like, I don't know I don't know about the pandemic from 2020.
It wouldn't surprise me. I think the big thing that just is mind-boggling to me is the railing against the idea of a vaccine very heavily and predominantly from a generation that saw the development of multiple vaccines that improved quality of life.
Yes.
Like that's just completely contradictory.
Yeah, there's just so much that I have read about, like, academic findings about baby boomers, and then what I see, what's going on around me. That it's congruent. It's not. There's not a lot of like, the data says this, but the feeling is this. There's not a mismatch there, but it's just mind-boggling.
Well, it kind of ties into the topic I floated, but I sent you via text, and then of course added the same text to the notes.
Yeah. I was thinking that's what we were going to be talking about.
Yeah, I think it kind of roots itself in a couple of different things. And so the topic that I floated was this idea of discussing opinion versus qualified opinion versus fact. And I think there are other ways to carve that up as well. But the phrase that keeps coming back to mind, which is what started me down this path of thinking about it, is the phrase that everyone is entitled to their opinion. And I think that's horribly inaccurate and has been twisted over time to mean that your opinion is your opinion and cannot be refuted, and that's BS.
100% agreed. It's like you're entitled to have, it was originally meant to be like, it's okay for her to think what you think, but we're just going to move on without you.
Well, I think it's even slightly more abstract than that. I think it's okay to think what you think in the face of something that supports what you think. And absent that, we'll agree to disagree and move forward.
Right.
Because if you have something that supports your opinion that refutes another opinion, well, that's where debate comes into play.
Yes, but if we can have a classical argument about it.
Right. But if you have two differing opinions and neither opinion has anything to base it upon or to provide any kind of context or background for, well, then that's when, all right, you're quote unquote entitled to your opinion. We'll agree to not be in agreement on this one, and we'll move on to the next topic. And that is fine. The issue that we have found ourselves now in is that everyone seems to believe that they can just say, well, that's my opinion, and call it a day, and you can't argue it or refute it or anything. And that's not the basis of living in any type of society. It's not the basis of any interpersonal interaction.
Well, it's sort of turned into this equivalent of everyone gets a trophy. And now we have sayings like everyone has an opinion, and everyone has an asshole.
Yeah, I thought about using that too.
I mean, we have
the quote is opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one.
Right. So, and most of the time we don't want to see yours. So, yeah. So something like this something similar, something related to this happened. And I was recently saying to my girlfriend, hey, I think you're drinking water too fast. Like she'd like get a liter of water and she'd drink it really fast. And then she'd drink another one really fast. I was like, I think you're drinking it too fast. She's like, what do you mean? She's like, well, not in the sense that you're going to like overhydrate and kill yourself, but like, I think you're drinking it so fast that you can't use all of that water. Your body can't absorb all of that water. And I think I said it to her twice. And the second time I said it to her, and I was like, let me just go ahead and stop myself and say, I don't know. Like, I would actually have to look and find at what rate the average person uptakes water, and like how quickly, like how much water is too much to drink where it becomes unusable. So, it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, I have this opinion, I have this thought, this thing, and it's not entirely baseless where it comes from, but I don't actually know the numbers. And so I'm talking to you in a way where I think I know what I'm talking about, but I actually don't. I need to find out. And we just don't see that kind of self-awareness when people start talking about what their feelings are, because feelings are just feelings. They're not wrong. And when you're faced with the facts, it doesn't mean how you feel about something is automatically going to change or go away. But we have to recognize that feelings just are, and no matter how strongly they affect us, they may not be right.
Yeah, the way that I've described something similar in the past is that you can think of trying to put this within the framework of thought processes, right? So you can think of logically stepping through something as the fact discovery phase. But just because you can logically think of it doesn't mean that your emotional reaction to it is the same. And that emotional reaction would be the feeling about the situation. Same principle, slightly interchanging the terminology, but it's another way to recognize that behaviorally speaking, feelings are an emotional response. And an emotional response is by its very nature not rooted in pure, objective, factual observation.
I love what my friend Joshua says regarding feelings. And I think he works backwards, and he goes, actions are moral or immoral, thoughts are correct or incorrect, and feelings just are. And I think it's such a good way to start, at least a good premise to like, I have these feelings and it's okay for me to have these feelings, whatever they are. And then like how I entertain them in my mind can be good or bad or correct or incorrect, to use that terminology. And then my actions will be moral or immoral. I thought that was a really good way to start, how do you it's a good way to like start understanding how you can manage your feelings and so forth.
I like the comparison. I struggle a bit with the concept of actions being moral or immoral and that being it, because of the fluid concept of morality based on culture and society. Because morality would be different than, or what is considered morally or immorally correct.
It changes.
It does, but it's also different based on context, where there's maybe not the appropriate way to think of it, but the more universal concept would be, is it ethical or unethical?
Unethical or unethical?
Yeah, I've heard both. I think unethical is what I normally go with, but since immoral, unethical,
See, I'm not sure if it's, see, sometimes like it could be the same thing, but like, I've heard numerous times on various podcasts, secure versus, they'll say insecure, and that like triggers me because they actually mean unsecure, because unsecure means it's not secured, and insecure means that you have feelings that are lacking security. And in the context of this has been like, websites, are they secure, and I think the correct response would be unsecure, not insecure.
Yeah, but the problem is that it's not necessarily one or the other, but some level in between as well. And how do you denote that?
Well, the thing that I keep going back to when I get triggered by something like this is that, you know what? The point of the word is to communicate an idea, and they're communicating the opposite of a secure website. So I get that. And so in that regard, they've accomplished what they want to accomplish. And I'm over here just like being a little butt munch saying it should be unsecure. Will I give them feedback about it? No, because like it's not, I know what they're trying to say, and it's not it's unworthy of feedback.
That's fair enough. So going back to just the overall topic, the thing that this led me to, there have been a number of people that I've heard making comments about, I'll just be blunt, about Biden's mental health. And for some reason or another, the link between, or there's been discussion revolving around dementia. So before we proceed further, I want to interject that behaviorally, which would at least be something I am qualified to speak about, behaviorally, those behaviors that are consistent with dementia are not presented in the current president. I would not suppose, or I would not create an opinion based on a diagnosis, because I am not a clinical professional. But that's kind of the point for what triggered continuing this line of questioning and understanding. Because someone could certainly say, I believe the president has dementia. And at face value, you could think of that as an opinion. Not a opinion based on fact, but an opinion nonetheless.
Yeah, certainly not a diagnosis.
Right. But is it really an opinion, or is it taking it a step further beyond what an opinion should be and attempting to do something further than just having an opinion on mental state? And so my thought is, unless you are a clinical professional, that's not an opinion you're qualified to have. You can absolutely be concerned about a person's mental health or well-being and absolutely have the opinion that maybe mentally something's not right. But taking it beyond that, unless you are a clinical professional, is overstepping the idea of what an opinion should be. But then on the flip side of that, I think about, well, what is it that we're taught an opinion is? And it's what you think about a situation.
It's, at that point, we could say that's an unqualified opinion, and it's just as important to me as your asshole. But then the only way to be as charitable as possible, if you're using those words to communicate that you think that the president might have an issue, and those are the words that you choose to use, then yeah, I guess that's okay thing to say, but we all have to be in agreement that this is an unqualified opinion that you shouldn't even hold, because you don't have any of the qualifications to make that kind of, like, I can't even tell you, like, I know what dementia is, but like if I really wanted to say, oh, I think somebody's exhibiting the symptoms of dementia, I'd have to go look up and see what it actually is. And I think most people would have to go look and see what the symptoms of dementia are. It's just kind of one of those things that people say it's something to indicate that we think there's a mental breakdown that's happening in this person's brain. Maybe even mental breakdown is not the right word. There's something wrong with the brain. And so we're just picking some disease where we kind of can know what the symptoms may or may not be. So,
well, yeah. You're picking terminology that communicates an idea, just to bring it full circle.
Yes.
It's something that seems common enough.
But it's kind of dangerous to do this.
Yes. And that's kind of the point of why I wanted to have this as a topic in the first place, because the big problem is that a lot of the people who are using similar terminology are not willing to hear that opinion is wrong.
Yeah.
Even when presented with factual information to the contrary. And that's the danger of opinions in general. Because it's fine to have a thought or a feeling or a concern or opinion. None of those things are wrong in and of themselves. And if that's the way you're able to communicate it, that's fine. It's fine in the grand scheme of initiating conversation. It's not necessarily fine in it from a continuation of the same statement perspective. But that starts to get into some subtleties that are kind of outside the scope of this part of the conversation. So I was just going to say that the biggest missing piece is that having the opinion is fine, but being receptive to the refutation of said opinion with some additional information has to also be fine.
Yes. So the problem therein is that people overvalue their opinions. And so whenever somebody refutes that opinion, and let's say they correctly do so with fact, that refutation feels like a rebuke, even though it could be done in the gentlest way possible, because people value their own opinions so highly, they feel like they are being attacked when you present them with facts.
And to take it a step further, just because of the way a number of things have been presented to the public over the past, we'll be generous and just say year, what many people constitute as a fact has become so blurred that for a lot of people, fact is indistinguishable from opinion.
You're not kidding. I mean, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the simplest way to describe it, because I have so many little rants I could go on there, and I was trying not to get off on a tangent. But facts are something where it's unequivocal. There has been something that has been done to determine an answer, and it has been provided. And it is not something that you can just say, I don't want to accept it because it doesn't match. Like, facts can be proven true or false, or correct, incorrect. You know, they are.
Yeah, we'll just say
they're binary.
Like if, well, I was going to say, like, if you take it a step further, you can say this is what we understand to be true with the information that we have. And these are the we're calling those facts. What we understand to be true with what we know, we're calling those facts. And then, like, if we get more information and we find out that what we would call a fact now is incorrect, we update those things. We update that information. You know, I think we talked about this on this podcast, and you know, early on, that people were seeing that happen with the science regarding the pandemic and regarding what best practices were for social distancing and mask wearing and so forth. And it was just like, oh, it was this and then it was that. And it was like, yeah, we got more information and we found out what we're saying this because this is what we think based on what we have. And then we get more and we think, okay, now this is what we're saying with what we have. Same thing. The facts are based on what we currently know.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a curveball in though. So I agree. I'm not saying I disagree, but here's where most people have lost sight of a distinction with regard to what we consider to be fact versus a truth. Theories based on observations and data are also true, but that doesn't mean that they are written in stone, immutable objects. Once it progresses beyond that to a point where it is just completely indisputable, those things are the things that are what most people are looking for as facts. But that's not, like, for it to be factual doesn't mean it has to be something that can't change. Does that make sense? I think I kind of stumbled through the description.
No.
But I was trying not to go, theory law, because it's not always science based.
Right. Facts change. The facts. Like I've always liked to think about it as like the truth is there. Like truth is what corresponds with reality. I remember getting smacked with this in my early 20s, and from a relatively unlikely source. And I took it and I was like, yeah, truth is what corresponds with reality. And that's not going to change. Like, our perspective on it changes. What we know about it changes. How we describe it will change. But the actual events that happen don't change. They are. And just how we can communicate it, understand it, that is what is. That's the thing that changes. And so we say, these are the facts with what we know now. And so just to, like, as a shorthand, we say, these are the facts. Is that?
Yeah, I think I like that description better. I was just digesting it a little bit. The part that the way I like the phrasing that the truth and the facts themselves don't change, but we're not wired to be consumers of that raw data. We're wired in a way that lets us perceive that and internalize it and understand it.
I'm actually like thinking about, I don't want to go too sciencey, but like I'm thinking about like Chemistry 101, and they tell you a bunch of stuff in Chemistry 101. And all right, this is how it is in chemistry. This is, and then you get to like, higher up chemistry, and they're like, remember how we told you it was this in Chemistry 101? Well, actually, we told you that so that you would understand this concept, but this is actually what's happening. And then it's like, oh. And then, you go higher up and it's like, well, we're going to tweak it a little more. And then you can keep going high up enough where it's like, people are looking to, make sure this is true. So far the data, is either the same or the data is different. So, but yeah, there's sometimes we'll say these are the facts to communicate what we need to communicate in that moment for that particular thing. And we might use some different facts. And it's not like cherry picking facts. I mean, sometimes that does happen. But it gets tricky. And I think people are just really unwilling to deal with the fact that life is far more complex than we want it to be. And it does require a bit more work than we're able to put in or want to put in to understanding what's around us. I remember having a phrase of the day calendar, and one of the phrases that has stuck with me since my teenage years was, it's so much easier to jump to conclusions than to dig for facts.
I was having a different conversation earlier that completely unrelated, but the same theme crops up, and that is most people just are not willing to put in the effort to understand something. Most people just want you to tell them what they're supposed to understand.
They want to be spoon-fed.
I said it nicer.
I'm just dealing with it. There are some people around me in this world that just are like, they're wanting me to wanting me to spoon feed them their stuff that I was made to work for. And I'm so glad I was made to work for this. One, it changed how I work, but I feel like I hope that if I demand this of these people, what was demanded of me, that they will also respond the way that I will, or respond the way that I did. So far, we're not there yet, but it's spoon feeding and hand holding are terms I've used a bit this week. So, and it's only Tuesday.
So originally, when I thought about this topic, it felt a lot clearer and easier to talk through than what it has turned out to be. But I think that's just because at a high level, it really is a matter of wanting people to put in that little bit of effort just to understand whether they're relaying information based on something that is out there or relaying information based on some other feeling, just understanding why they're relaying the information they're relaying. And that's not easy to follow. So let me provide a bit more context. Going back to this idea that the president suffers from some sort of mental incapacitation, right? Where does that come from? Is that coming from a dislike of policy? Well, no, that certainly doesn't fit, right? If you dislike policy, you would attack something else related to the policy. You wouldn't attack mental clarity or cognitive function. So
maybe
it's not the first step. You might get there, but it doesn't really fit the picture to me.
Well, we certainly had it. The previous 45 was a president that was one that neither of us liked. Policy, lifestyle, you name it. And I would say we eventually got there, but I this policy was a problem. That policy, this behavior, I went straight to a particular, the one that comes to mind is Covfefe. What was that about? And it's you listen to that man talk, and it's childlike. Childlike has a childish, not childish, no. But it was just there was something going on there where it's I don't know what this is, and I hesitate to say any sort of mental disorder because I'm not qualified, but Yeah, I don't know why you go to dementia unless you're just like being lazy about how you want to insult a president whose policies you don't like.
Well, so that was the question that caused me to start looking around. And I found one reference. I may get this wrong, but I think it was from the Texas Attorney General, who is Republican. It may have been a senator or, I don't know, someone in Texas, I believe, government position, calling for basically a medical evaluation. And that was it. That's all I could find. It's the only place I could find that referenced dementia and Biden in the same story or paragraph or, conglomerate of words, for lack of better phrasing. And the idea started to gain more focus that it's not... If you go back a couple of generations or a generation or just to a slightly older demographic, it's not the policies that's the problem. It's the Democrat label that's the problem.
Oh, totally.
And if you don't like a person based on a label, you're the problem. And that's kind of the root of like my issues in general over the past however many years that I've been thinking through my issues with labeling theory.
By the way, I have been low-key spreading your issues with label theory or labeling theory.
I need to just finally take the time to write a full-on paper, research paper, dig in, and everything, but I'm kind of lazy.
I mean, it's a good. I like it. I like it. It helps. It's certainly because I've seen people talk. It's like I'm this label, I'm that label, and I was like, if you could, you wouldn't use any labels, and you just would be. But we kind of we do it to be helpful, but here's where it becomes problematic and so forth. So, yeah, and I've been saying this ever since 2018 when Doug Jones ran for the Senate seat in Alabama in that special election, and that is if he just stuck an R next to his name, like he wouldn't have to change any of his policies. Maybe he'd just have to say I'm pro-life, but also he could probably keep all the same pro-choice policies, but just say I'm pro-life and stick an R by his name, and he'd win all the time in this state.
Yeah. Yep. It baffles me. It really does. It doesn't just because of the amount of time I've spent examining, the idea of how labels affect us in general, but that's the logical side of me saying, okay, I can understand this to a degree. But if I just think about it from my personal viewpoint standpoint, it baffles me that you could put so much emphasis and identity into a label that probably you couldn't describe what you think that label means in the first place. Because the people that I have heard talk about it, talk about what the party used to look like, which is not what it looks like today.
I mean, at this point, Congress is, 650 people arguing on Twitter and then voting 75% of the time together.
Yeah.
I mean, how much? I mean, it's all a popularity contest at this point.
Well, one of the things that I am going to take the time to do is to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding things or not misunderstanding, misremembering key pieces of information over the lifespan of the political parties. And I say that in a way that it's just a matter of, I know what my current assessment of them are and how I feel like the views have just completely shifted or flipped directions. But I want to verify that. Like what did each party, what was each party founded upon from an ideological standpoint? Where have things transitioned, et cetera, et cetera? Like I just kind of want to map that out in my head at this point. Because most of the concepts that I hear about, or most of the things I hear from those people who really tie their identity to a political affiliation, don't make sense in the landscape of the past 40-ish years. So where does that come from? Like, is it really just that their parents were so focused on a political party that it's just been ingrained? Like, is there some, multi-generational aspect to it from a storytelling perspective? Or is this just some strange fluke that happens to be affecting everybody the same general way?
I don't even know. I mean, my best guess is, the 24-hour news networks are controlling a certain narrative or writing a certain narrative, not necessarily even controlling it. And I don't know. Like, I was just thinking, like, when did we have a president that we legitimately needed to question his mental health? In retrospect, we know that it was Ronald Reagan. He had Alzheimer's. Like, he was very inactive, or he was afflicted by we are now saying the facts are that he was afflicted by Alzheimer's pretty significantly in his second term. And I mean, I was a kid, but I don't remember anyone talking about it. What's up with, Reagan's mental health.
No, and arguably, he's still one of the more popular presidents of the past, 40-ish, 50-ish years, depending on kind of how far back you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, depending on, where your positions on policy lie, you think that he's a great president. Even when you're like faced with, he wasn't a fiscally conservative president. He was only out there for the, top 1%. So, yeah, I mean, we've talked about like the idea of like it's a very American thing to want to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and make something of yourself and not rely on anybody. It's like a point of pride for Americans. And the idea of taking a handout is a form of failure. That and all of Reagan, Reaganomics is just those ideas, some of those ideas put on paper.
And it's fascinating from the opposite perspective, because the formation of society inherently means that you're not focused on doing it yourself. You're focused on
right
the contribution to the social circle, whether that be a neighborhood or a village or a town. Like you don't get to you don't get to pick and choose. It's either the individual self or it's a collective of some number of people. There's no both.
Right. I mean, people are living in a society where they are benefiting from the collective. We have grocery stores. We have specialists. We have specialists we have people specializing in fields of specialty. So those are all wonderful things, but it's because we've all just, we live in a society where like some of us do this and some of us do that, so that other of us don't have to I don't have to farm because someone else does. So I get to do what I need to do. And then you have, really great things that come out of that. So
yeah, the social contract, technically, I guess, is what it refers to. But
I remember that.
Yeah, I was thinking about making a statement, but I think it's probably late enough in the evening not to make said statement, because it's going to generate enough discussion that maybe I just hold on to that for later.
Why don't you say it and then we cut it out, and I'm now curious.
Well, the whole concept of what it means to have freedoms within the scope of what it means to exist within a society. So, in general, like how the country was founded and what it was founded for has been bastardized and twisted so many times, depending on who's telling the narrative, that it's interesting to take a step back and say, what is actually the unifying thought for what the Founding Fathers were trying to convey, not what did they write on a sheet of paper.
If you want to talk about, I can't remember if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, when you said quotes are inherently problematic because of the context. Well, something written on a piece of paper is similarly problematic because it also requires context.
Right. And I guess to tease it and then not go into too much detail.
Nope. Save it for the next one.
But if you really look at the ideas presented, what you see doesn't convey anything about trying to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, self-made. Everything conveys trying not to be restrictive of individual practices as long as it fits within the societal structure.
You know, I knew that, but I never heard it articulated. You know, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever heard it articulated that way. That's just going to be a thing. I'm going to take that and I'm going to run with it, man. I love it.
Yeah, I think we basically have determined what the next couple of episodes are probably going to be about, because I'm not so sure we can do justice to that in one.
No.
And I might actually do a little bit of research for the next episode.
Woohoo! You know, so that we can save that idea for the next show, I didn't get a chance to say what I wanted to say when I first read your text message for this topic, and it was just like the example I thought of was something that was happening to me about a year ago. I was having I was limping because something in my glute was, like, one of my glutes on the left side of my body was sore, and I didn't know what it was. And it was like, you know, at first it felt like maybe the muscle, just like there was like a spasm or something, and it just needed to be worked out. But like actually doing more, you know, like walking it, like trying to walk it off, actually made it worse. And I was like, what is going on? So like I started looking up. I remember looking up the symptoms of a pinched nerve, and I was like, oh, okay. I more than likely I have a pinched nerve. Like I read the symptoms, I have all of those symptoms. Okay, that makes sense to me. And so, but I just couldn't, like, when people ask me what's wrong, you know, I'm limping, what's wrong? I couldn't just say I have a pinched nerve. Like I just couldn't bring myself to say pinched nerve. I was like, I would always respond with, I have the symptoms of a pinched nerve. Because I don't know, like I can't get in there and, like, you know, say. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, you know, sometimes even doctors are like, you have a pinched nerve. Like, do you see what's pinching it? Did you do a scan? No, if not, but I mean, the symptoms were enough where, you know, if a doctor said it, then yeah, I'd repeat it. But like, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not qualified. All I did was look up, you know, what are the symptoms of this issue? I'd be like, oh, I'm exhibiting the symptoms of a pinched nerve.
You know, I do wonder how many people actually think about their phrasing for something like that. Like I wouldn't have said I have the symptoms of, but I would have said I think it's just. You know, the same concept, right?
Similar, yeah.
But how many people actually do that? How many people wouldn't just say, oh, it's a pinched nerve?
Right, they look up, they see they have all the symptoms, so they say it's this thing. Because what else could it be? Like another really good example is, like, if you get food poisoning. Well, where'd you get food poisoning? Well, I definitely got food poisoning from this meal that night. Maybe. Like, it's so like the onset of it can be quick. It can take a while. I don't think that you can say that with I don't think you can say that with absolute certainty ever, unless you like eat a meal and then don't eat another meal until you're certain that any possible symptoms from that meal have I don't know.
Yeah, I think you could potentially narrow it down if multiple people had the same thing, but then had different other meals. Like, there are ways to correlate it enough to say, well, we're pretty sure it was this.
Yeah.
Maybe you couldn't say it definitively.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm okay with someone saying, like, I can say, like, there was a night I got food poisoning. I'm like, I'm fairly confident it was the cheese on a burger at a place that I went to. I'm fairly confident, but I can't say with absolute certainty. I can't say with, any sort of certainty. I just know 6 hours prior to eating that, or 6 hours after eating that, I got really sick and it was food poisoning. But
and even then, I think it was food poisoning unless you actually went to see a physician.
You're absolutely right. I think it was food poisoning. I could have had an entirely different, it could have been a norovirus for all I know. Like, it's unlikely, but it very well could have been a 12-hour bug. Like, there are 12-hour bugs that you pick up from the world around you that didn't come from food.
And there are plenty of things in this world that are happy or unhappy little coincidences based on how you view them.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Bob Ross. Happy little coincidence.
I was reading something about that earlier. Well, it wasn't something specifically about him. It was taking the Bob Ross idea and applying it to IT work, and the phrase was happy little outages. So that was on my mind.
I like it.
It was fun.
Somebody, an IT guy said to me, do you know what the difference between someone in IT and a developer? Did I ask you this before?
I don't think so. I was thinking what my initial answer would be, but I don't think I've heard it. I'm not sure. What's the difference?
The IT guy never thinks he's a developer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I really like that one. Because there's a lot of developers that are like, oh, yeah, I know this idea. Like, you are good at troubleshooting because you do that for your work. But, I've heard developers talk about the troubleshooting they do. And I'm like, you've missed some big things at the beginning of troubleshooting. But that's okay.
Yeah, I like it. But the funny thing is it's so inside. Unless you're an IT guy, you're not going to get it.
Well, yeah. The last person I told this to, he just kind of like had a similar response to you, and he was like, well, I've been a developer and an IT person. I was like, yeah, but
at that point you're an IT guy. Like, you can never shed the IT guy.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
Well, it influences so much about the way you approach things. Like, even if you go from an IT guy to something else, and long winding path, and then eventually become a developer. Like, there's so much that being an IT guy ingrains in the way you approach a situation that I don't think you could ever unlearn it if you tried.
No, and I don't think you would want to. I think about the training that we went through at Apple, and I was like, well, one, I tell people like, it was world-class training, and for sure, like, it was world-class, and it totally changed me in like so many good ways. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
and we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.